Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity that is before us at this time. As we commence the sitting of the Finance Committee and deliberate on the appropriations before us and seek to understand and to know and ultimately approve a budget for this country for the next 2 years. Father, we recognize the great responsibility we have before us to make sure that we use the resources and limited resources that government has to the most effective and efficient use. I pray today for our deliberations and for all that we do, and pray that all that we do and say will be done decently and in order. Would you bless our deliberations this day, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Please be seated. Good afternoon, everyone. This House is now in committee. Specifically, it is in Finance Committee. And the purpose of this meeting of Finance Committee is to consider the items shown on the schedule to the appropriation bill for the 2018-2019 financial years. In case honourable members have forgotten their appropriations bill, pages 305 to 323 of the Plan and Estimates document has the same detail as the schedule to the bill. This committee is in session in accordance with Standing Orders 63.3, subsection 3, and 75, subsection 1. The quorum of Finance Committee is 10 members, excluding the chairman of the committee, and that's myself as the Minister for Finance. Given that government must conclude Finance Committee proceedings, Finance Committee's report must be presented to the House. The House has to consider the third reading of the bill. Administrative work by the LA staff must occur to prepare the bill for assent by Her Excellency the Governor. And the bill has to be assented to by the Governor. And the fact that at least 3 ministers of government must leave the Cayman Islands no later than the 25th of November 2017 for important government business in London. This makes it highly desirable for us to finish the business of getting the third reading of the appropriations law approved by the Legislative Assembly by Friday, the 24th of November, 2017. And the appropriation law has to be gazetted no later than the 31st of December, 2017, so that there is an appropriations law in place on January 1st, 2018, the start of the financial year. I'm respectfully asking for members' cooperation in the following ways. First, I ask that you ask your questions promptly and do not make long introductory preambles to your questions. The time for that was during the debate of the bill, and that has now been concluded. This, I believe, is the most important aspect of cooperation that I am seeking from honourable members, and I believe that it will save us a substantial amount of time. I know from past committee proceedings that members will wish to explain why they are asking questions, but generally speaking, such explanations are not needed. And where they are, they need to be extremely brief. Proceedings in Finance Committee do not afford members on either side of the House an opportunity to debate all over again. It is also fair, important, and necessary for me to note that honourable ministers and chief officers must also refrain from giving long-winded contexts and preambles to their answers as well. I don't believe it would be in the spirit of mutual cooperation to set a limit to the number of questions each member can ask on an appropriation. However, that remains an option, and I reserve the right to do so if progress in getting through the schedule to the bill is turning particularly burdensome and slow. Questions and answers must be posed and provided through me, the chair of the committee. This enables the conduct of the committee to be more orderly and efficient. Excessive banter and direct talk across the floor bypassing the chairman will not be condoned. And to be fair, Both sides have done this in the past, and throughout the deliberations of the committee, a tremendous amount of time is lost because of the banter and crosstalk. We really have a tight agenda time frame to accomplish what we need to do. And I shall be adhering strictly to the duration of breaks and start time. 1 hour means an hour for me, and if I say we start at 9 a.m., I will be here to commence the proceedings at 9 a.m. and not 10:30. It is my desire to start the deliberations of the committee on time, and I solicit everyone's cooperation. We have a lot to accomplish. As it is observed in the House that the Speaker's ruling shall apply, so in finance committees, the chairman's decisions must be respected. I will do my utmost to be judicious and fair to everyone. We will undoubtedly have to work beyond 4:30 p.m., I would say, every day that we are convened. I will do my best to let members know as early as possible at the start of each day the working hours for that day. Accordingly, I let you know now that we will be working this evening until about 11 o'clock. Approval for times in the schedule, in accordance with Standing Order 64.3, I shall ask members for approval for a particular item by posing the questions. All those in favor of, and I shall state the name of the particular appropriation and its amount, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye, and those against, no, and you will respond appropriately. Once all of the appropriations on the schedule to the bill have been considered and voted upon by the committee, there are some additional closing procedural considerations that the committee also needs to vote upon. They include Standing Order 64.4, which seeks a decision from the committee as to whether the schedule to the bill stands part of the bill. Standing Order 64.5 requires the committee to determine whether the clauses in the bill do stand part of the bill. And Standing Order 64.7 requires the committee to vote on the question as to whether the bill be reported to the House. Honorable members, I would like the committee to consider the appropriations on the schedule to the bill by starting with those appropriations to the Honorable Premier, beginning with the Ministry of Human Resources and Immigration, followed by the appropriations in respect of the Ministry of Community Affairs, and finally the Cabinet Office. We now turn to the specific appropriations. They may be found on page 8 of the appropriation bill. And the first item on to be considered is HCA 1, Policy Advice and Ministerial Services on Human Resources and Border Control Matters, $4,468,512 in respect of 2018. And $4,558,279.
Mr. Is there a particular reason why we just can't follow the document? Or is it because some people are missing why we have to jump forward a couple of pages? The plan and estimates?
There were no specific reason why we can't, other than this was the order I agreed ahead of time. Wish to go back? Is Cabinet Office staff here?
Mr. Chairman, Human Resources and Immigration.
Yes. Okay. HCA 1, I will repeat, Policy Advice and Ministerial Services on Human Resources and Border Control Matters. $4,468,512 in 2018 and $4,558,279 for 2019. Are there any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Member for Northside.
Mr. Chairman, this vote includes MH2, which is a vote for $1,301,412 to set up the NHRD, the National Human Resource Department. Can we have some kind of explanation of how this is going to be done, how it's going to be monitored to make sure it's implemented within the budget schedule? Who is going to be, is it going to be driven at the ministerial level by the chief officer? Or is there, because this vote also includes a lot of money for NWDA and stuff like that, and I just want to know who's going to drive this change to a human resource and create this human resource department.
Premier?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, before we start, for the sake of clarity and information to the committee, I would just like to introduce the team that I have with me to assist with this. I have Chief Officer Wesley Howell, who's the Chief Officer in the Ministry of Human Resources and Immigration. I have Mr. Vinton Chinsey, who's the Chief Financial Officer in the same ministry. We also have the Acting Chief Immigration Officer, Mr. Bruce Smith, the Acting Director of the NWDA, Mrs. Loy Kellerman, and Mr. Bernard Ebanks, the Director of Labor and Pensions, as well as the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Derek Byrne. Over the course of the proceedings, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, sorry, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I will be asking probably each of these officers to provide the necessary explanation, detailed explanation to the committee with respect to matters which I am not entirely au fait. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the question from the Leader of the Opposition, this policy for the creation of a Human Resources Department, which will amalgamate certain of the functions currently carried out by the Department of Immigration and those by the Department of Labor and the NWDA, is a policy that was proposed by my party during the elections and supported by other members of the coalition. It has found its way into the agreed policies of the current administration and is reflected in the work that we have done over the course of the past few months, as well as what is provided for in the budget by way of funding. It is driven by the ministry, who have taken on board expert advice in the form of Deloitte to provide a number of technical pieces of advice and surveys and the like. And the work is being done in conjunction with representatives from the NWDA and from the Department of Immigration, as well as the ministry.
To you, Mr. Chairman, I can tell the Premier that we on the opposition bench also support the creation of a Human Resource Authority Department. We just want to make sure that we know who to hold responsible for getting it done. They also includes in NWD1, a sum of $480,574. And the description of the services that this covers in the budget statements is career counseling, workforce readiness assessment, training, and other employment initiatives, e.g. Rated to Work, and by supporting targeting works whereby identifying barriers to employment and providing training and development opportunities which support Caymanians, support for the National Training Council. I just wonder, Mr. Chairman, if some of this wouldn't be better done in the Ministry of Education, since it seems to be relying very heavily on a training component.
Mr. Chairman, there are always these discussions and debates about where aspects of training and workforce readiness can be best delivered. For the moment, we are content to leave it where it is. This obviously the development of the HR department is in its nascent stages, and I expect that over the course of the next couple of years, because it would probably take us that long to actually deliver what we are proposing, there will be opportunities to look again at where particular aspects of what we're trying to do are best placed. But for the moment, the advice that I have and the decision we've taken is for it to, this aspect of it, the workforce readiness bit, to remain under the NWDA.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
ahead.
Could the Honorable Premier give some background information on the work conducted by Deloitte in terms of what information is being used to support these figures?
Premier.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'll ask the Chief Officer to address that level of detail.
And could I ask you for the record too, sir, if you just state your name and your position?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wesley Howell, Chief Officer, Ministry of Human Resources and Immigration. Mr. Chairman, the work carried out by Deloitte was initially tendered back in February, March of this year, so pre-election. The goal then was to analyze the pain points of the Immigration Department and come forward with priority areas for intervention and best options for intervention, including structural changes. Post-election, once the priorities of the coalition government were known, the scope was expanded to include the NWDA and portions of Department of Labor and Pensions. What we've received as part of that work, which included significant public consultation and surveying, are areas where we have the most need for development and change, including that is areas of priority for organizational change and a preferred option for the organizational structure to cover some of the pain points that members of the House and of this committee know exist, and ways that we can deliver on the promise of Caymanians first for job placement and efficient work permit processes that support that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just so I understand, the work involved mainly looking at the objective, the end game, and also the areas where we thought improvements need to be made. Has any work been done to look at as I know the Premier talked about establishing sort of a holistic system that is going to incorporate information from many different parts of government? Have we looked at the analysis of the workflow, information flow, how decision making is made, so that the whole system connects and fits together and works together, rather than just focusing on the end game? Have we looked at the pieces that go in between?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the member is absolutely correct. The end goal was the ultimate goal, but we also started looking at particularly at the pain points, and those included internal pain points between units within the Immigration Department, between NWD and Immigration, between NWD and NAU, and the information sharing from an enforcement perspective, from training back to the Ministry of Education for additional training. We are reviving some work we did some years ago with business process improvement and expanding that scope to include the work done by NWDA with that end goal in mind. So that's one of several work streams that make up a program of projects, and the members spot on that those business process, whether or not they're automated or they're just refined in the manual process, are definitely part of the scope of works that we have for this going forward.
And just one more from me. And you're comfortable then with this level of funding, that you have sufficient in the budget to deliver all of that?
Mr. Chairman, we could always use more, but we will make really good use of what we have. As the Premier mentioned, this is a 2-year rollout, so we're furiously working already. We have a steering committee of most of the stakeholders affected by this, and moving forward, we aim to deliver based on what we have as far as the budget, as much as we can. That is in the vision, and even some of the comments that have been coming out of the budget address, we've made note of those as well. So yeah, the short answer is you could use more, but we'll make use of what we have.
Member from outside.
Mr. Chairman, just to add for the benefit of the committee, that we are quite a ways down the track. I mean, to the point where we are looking at what the employee structure of this new department would look like, and what kind of expertise we will need to carry out these functions. As I said in my debate and in the policy statement, the objective is not simply to amalgamate the functions which are currently carried out by immigration with NWDA and just continue business as usual. It is to address this term, I don't want to use the pain points, to address the significant issues which are barriers, considered barriers to optimum Caymanian employment, to improve the readiness of our local workforce, to expedite the processing of work permits so that the process is efficient and fair. All of those are key features which we're keeping firmly in mind as we proceed with the development of this new plan.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just to say, is the government more comfortable with using an outside private sector consultant than using the expertise on organizational structure, et cetera, that already exists in I guess it would be the portfolio of the civil service?
Well, quite frankly, given the mandate we have to get this done in time, and given all of the other demands on the portfolio of the civil service, the decision was taken by the ministry that we should tender for the advice, and that's what we've done.
Are there any other questions? If not, I put question. All those in favor of...
Mr. Chairman,
Excuse me, sir.
I've been holding on my mic now a little while, so I guess I didn't catch your eye.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I want to go on a different thing, but related, somewhat related,
Okay.
if I may. The Premier's talked about the barriers. What to Caymanians' employment? What are the government plans to remove the barrier that currently private sector is asking Caymanian to prove through the immigration department that they are Caymanians?
Mr. Speaker, I don't know that is specifically addressed in on this particular initiative, but this is a long-standing, troublesome issue that we have to find a way legislatively to make it easier for those of us who are born in Cayman of Caymanian parents to easily demonstrate to anyone who needs to know that we are in fact Caymanian. Because if you receive Caymanian, the right to be Caymanian as a result of acknowledgement, you get a piece of paper. If you apply for the right to be Caymanian based on marriage, you get a piece of paper. If you apply for it on the basis of long living in the Cayman Islands for a long period of time and meeting the other criteria, you get a certificate, another piece of paper. But if you are born in Cayman of Caymanian parents, all you have is your birth certificate, which in and of itself does not prove that you are Caymanian for the purposes of the law. So we have to find a way, and it is my intent to try to do so during this term, to provide that assurance, that's the wrong word, to Caymanians So the identity by which we can easily identify, for whatever purpose, the fact that we are Caymanian as of right by virtue of our birth in these islands to Caymanian parents. But that's not part of this initiative.
Mr. Chairman, I recognize that. I said it was unrelated but connected to the barriers that Caymanians are experiencing. But this certainly has a policy advice on police and immigration and the likes, and that is precisely why I brought it up. I wonder if the Premier would tell us if government, in his looking at this, would be considering a national ID, i.e. Cayman Islands resident national ID that is produced and issued by the government. That is, from the two places that we are registered in this country, births and deaths and immigration, and the governor's office through naturalization. And that is amalgamating them with one office and issuing an ID from there which says Cayman Islands resident Caymanian, yes. If it says no, turn over and you would be on a work permit, permanent resident, or whatever the case.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I missed the first part of that contribution because I was trying to find the page in my book, but I think I got the gist of it. And yes, that is a possibility. I know directly, I mean, the challenges this poses, because for my son to be able to get employment here, he was born here of two Caymanian parents, and I don't know how many generations back, but he had to go through the same process of getting confirmation from immigration to submit to his employers to get hired. So I understand that this is a real live issue for us as Caymanians.
And Mr. Chairman, I want the Premier to know that personally, and I think personally I support doing something, and it was Fonso who brought that up initially way back, Alfonso Wright. But right now, we Caymanians, 8th, 10th generation, whatever, and I understand the birth certificate doesn't say, a number of birth certificates does not, up to a certain, before a certain time, they didn't say that your parents were Caymanian. British Nationality Act says the child takes the nationality of the mother. So naturally, if the birth certificate says that your mother's a Caymanian, then you are Caymanian, period. And you just need to get her birth certificate to prove that she was born here and Caymanian. What is happening now, Mr. Chairman, you and I and the Premier, to identify ourselves, we have to go to births and deaths, registry office. All others who it was issued to that the Premier spoke about, their record is stored at the immigration, because that was issued, their right status or whatever was issued through there. Why is it, first, that we are now required to go to immigration? Immigration has no control over you and I, except our movement in and out of the country. Can it be that Cabinet cannot do something? And I'm thinking of a number of things, but I wonder if the Premier would enlighten us. If there's something Cabinet could do to avoid Caymanians having to go to immigration, because when they get to the immigration, they still got produced for an acknowledgement. I think that's what they're asking for, acknowledgement of Caymanian status. The immigration still has asked that applicant, who is 8th, 10th generation Caymanian to go bring their birth certificate and their mother birth certificate. And all they're doing is writing a letter saying, yeah, you Caymanian. Is there something Cabinet can do to avoid that? Because real, I should go over to births and deaths and pick up my birth certificate. And I would ask the Premier if there's anything that he can think of that maybe we can do, short of sending a directive out to the entire country, which I thought, but you would have to put in the different scenarios.
Mr. Chairman, it is not a simple matter at all. I'll give you an example in a moment, one which is going to be before us shortly in this House. It's already before us, but we're going to have to deal with it. The thing is, some entity or some individual has got to make a pronouncement as to whether or not the person is Caymanian. So in the absence of any other that has fallen to immigration, who, believe you me, would rather didn't have to deal with it. But somebody or some entity has got to give the assurance to whoever it is relying on this person's right to be Caymanian that it is in fact, that is in fact the case. This is also related to the issue, some people call them, I've seen it written other places, ghost Caymanians. We have one in this, that Cabinet has, on the basis of a recommendation from the Immigration and Status Board, that Cabinet has conferred status on. A woman who is now in her 40s, who was born in Cayman and grew up in Cayman, went to school in Cayman, considered herself Caymanian all the way through until by some happening, she wound up marrying a Cuban national who applied then for an RERC, the right to employment rights certificate, based on her Caymanian status. And when the immigration asked her to prove that she is Caymanian, she could not, because of various changes in the law at the time. So the problem for employers is that they are increasingly concerned to ensure that the person they are hiring without a work permit, without applying for it, is actually Caymanian. So all of these little, not little, they're big, but all of these issues with the law and how many times it's been changed, and the people who have fallen between the cracks, and persons who, if they were not born here, grew up here, past the age of 18, never applied for status, but to all intents and purposes, and as far as any of us are concerned, are Caymanian. All of these things are coming home to roost, and are all part and parcel of the cleanup that is necessary as part of this overall exercise of immigration, not even really reform, but improvement. So all of these things we are taking on board and looking at how we can seek to address them.
Mr. Chairman, and the Premier will remember this because he was intimately involved in it. And when the UDP government changed the immigration law, we did an amnesty for those very people, January 1st, 2004 to December 31st, 2004. Unfortunately, the government didn't do a good job of telling people they could come in and get their business rectified. So it was a sunset clause that was placed in the law. I said that to say, I do not believe that we have large numbers of these people. In the scheme of things, of the overall population, it's too late now. They're here. We need to deal with them. Many of them had Cayman status. When they reach 18, it was taken away by operational law. Nobody went back to double check on it. I think we have failed, whether it's us here or the government, the actual operational government, has failed in trying to get the word out to these people. Right now, I believe to legitimize these people, it is a simple case of bringing an amendment to legislation, the immigration law, a quick one, which puts the sunset clause in there again, which will give them that ability to come and get this regularized within a particular time. I don't know if it needs to be even an amendment, but certainly a campaign on behalf of the government. The government go out on a campaign on behalf of these people, and they all come in so that we can get this regularized. That will move away that doubt about who is Caymanian from who's not. The rest of us then will be Caymanian by virtue of the status paper or by virtue of us having a birth certificate from the births and deaths registry. I wonder if the Premier would consider the government doing a campaign to get those people in order that we can regularize this thing, because that's what's causing the doubt, and the only persons that is suffering as a result of it is the indigenous Caymanian, and it's becoming a real problem for people who know who their great-grandfather was that grew up in West Bay or East End or Cayman Brack. And it's becoming a real problem. And it's going to get worse as time moves on and we get all our kids coming out of school, like your son, and they go and get education and know that their parents are Caymanian and they should be entitled to a job in their country.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have been thinking about this particular point. The lady that I spoke about just now was one who had she applied within this period that was provided for, she would have been okay too. But the sun set before she got up. So I don't know that the sunset clause is the most effective way to do it. My thinking is, and it hasn't fully evolved in my mind, but I think a better way to do it is to provide in the amending legislation for what happens to this category of people. The difficulty, obviously, is defining how that category or categories should be, so that regardless of, you don't rely on what those people have to do for them, but the law itself, once they fit the criteria, they get it. Because relying on them to apply, you're always going to wind up with a set of people who never knew about it, never remembered, never got it done, couldn't be bothered, were away, whatever the case is. So you're always going to find those cases like that. And so what has happened in a number of cases now, this is, I think, the second or third one since I have been Premier, where we go through the long, arduous route of a recommendation, an application being made to the board. The board can't deal with it because it doesn't fit within the four corners of the law. They make a recommendation for cabinet to make a grant. Then we have to do that. Then we have to bring it down here. So to address the problem. So we have to get away from that and just develop the necessary amendments to the legislation to be able to address these particular issues. Easier said than done, I fully acknowledge. But we have to do it because we can't have, I hate the expression, but ghost Caymanians walking around who all of us believe are Caymanians, who they believe, then all of a sudden some event happens in their life, they say, oops, I'm not Caymanian after all.
And Mr. Chairman, for all intent and purposes, they look like us, they talk like us, they do everything like us, they even walk like us. We're all Caymanians as far as I'm concerned. And I support the Premier. I was only talking about sunset clause, and when I was talking about that, I was thinking like 2 or 3 years or something like that. But maybe we don't need the sunset clause. We just need, like the Premier said, to put that legislation, that amendment in place, and it stays forever, that if you find one that missed it somewhere down the line, we don't have to go, they don't have to they don't have to go to the immigration department. But we need to do it as a matter of urgency so that we can, even if we miss some, they can get corrected in short order, and it does not affect all the other Caymanians, because if a person that goes to the private sector now, most private sector firms, businesses are requiring it, and it is becoming a bother. It's becoming a hassle for Caymanians. Caymanians are just getting angry about it, and we cannot afford to have our people getting angry. Worse, all those 1,000 kids coming home shortly. That compounds the whole problem. And whatever we can do, I am willing to support that. We need to straighten this thing out and cut its dragon head off.
Mr. Chair.
Member from West Bay Central.
Mr. Chair, through you, I don't know if it's you or maybe you or the Premier can direct me. My question I have is on to the Immigration Board. If this is not the section, you can point me in the right direction, please.
If you look at page 192 of the budget statements, there's a special heading in there for the boards and stuff. 192 of this for the big one.
What page that is, Mr.
Yeah, we're dealing with policy matters now.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for Savannah for pointing that out to the member. We're dealing with policy matters now, not specific
Thank you.
immigration board matters. They'll come up in a bit.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Premier. On what basis are employers refusing to accept birth certificates as proof that you're Caymanian? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that the birth certificate in and of itself doesn't prove that you're Caymanian. My birth certificate doesn't prove that I'm Caymanian at all, because it doesn't even have a reference to the nationality of my parents. I understand that the newer certificates now have a reference to the nationality of the parents, but I am told from good authority that even those are not reliable. So,
But I think some effort has to be made to make sure that a birth certificate issued by the Birth and Records Office carries with it some kind of authority and authenticity to it, especially if it's not original.
yeah. The issue is about nationality, you see, because somebody at the births and deaths registry has got to make a determination as to whether or not what's on the form that the parents have filled out is actually true with respect to nationality. So we got to sort all of those things out before the thing can be considered reliable in that regard.
Member from East End.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I heard the member from Georgetown, West Bay North wanted to change the subject, but I just wanted to continue on the line of policy and legislation, and the Premier will understand, without getting into any minutia. I wonder if he can tell me the matter of that I brought to Cabinet's attention concerning immigration, if that is progressing.
Mr. Chairman, the member has me at a disadvantage. I'm afraid to confess I don't remember.
I believe I sent you and the deputy governor a text that day of at least two instances of it, and you probably would have forgotten it by now. But I don't want, because I fear that there may be a run on the office, and I don't want to go into the minutia of it. I think he knows what I'm talking about.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir.
I think the issue, I've just been reminded by my chief officer, involving the issue of substantial presence.
I just want to know without any detail if there's any progress on it.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have, the ministry has developed has provided some advice and developed some recommendations for possible amendments to the legislation. So I haven't yet had the benefit of seeing them, but as soon as I have, I'll have a word with you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I do apologize. 99% of the people here in the country don't even know what I'm talking about, but I just wanted to ask him.
Member for Baden. I
West,
can't remember.
Boston West.
Baden West.
Yeah.
Your question.
Just on the subject of policy, I'm just curious in terms of the trying to differentiate between temporary work permits and I guess the full work permit, in that a lot of companies are now using the temporary work permits as a kind of provision and then going to a full, and I don't think that was the intention in terms of where we brought about the temporary work permit. So I just wanted the government to clarify in terms of what's their official position in that regard.
Well, Mr. Chairman, there's no question that a number of companies do use the temporary work permit provision as a means of probation for people on work permits. I don't see anything at all wrong with that. Before a business person invests huge sums of money in bringing people here and applying for a full work permit and with all the things that go along with that, and committing, I don't see anything wrong with them wanting to consider whether the person works out. So you got 3-month work permits and 6-month temporaries, and you got 6-month temporaries. Other businesses operate on the basis of using the temporary work permit thing for just that. Although the position that they have is not temporary by any means, the person they employ is considered temporary as far as their operations are concerned. You see this a lot with the local bars and restaurants, where they bring someone in for 3 months, might get them another 3 months, and then they essentially roll them over before they are required to pay pension, which is a significant issue for local businesses. So it's used in a number of ways which perhaps were not contemplated when the provisions were actually passed, but none of which I see as particularly objectionable.
To you, Mr. Chair, I think the concern would lie in that the barrier to obtain a temporary permit is somewhat lower than obtaining a full permit, and the documentation is less. So we want to make sure that if they're going from a temporary to a permanent, that they go back through the process and fulfill the criteria of a proper work permit. Because it would be a way of eliminating people from knowing that the job was available.
So I'm being reminded, Mr. Chairman, by my chief officer, that one of the things that we are contemplating is that when an employer seeks to move from the 3-month to a 6-month temporary, that be subjected to the full range of requirements, including the health check and the advertising, to which full-time work permits are subject.
Member Freestone, you have a question? Okay. Now I'll put the question. All those in favor of HCA 1, Policy Advice and Ministerial Services on Human Resources and Border Control Matters, the amount of $4,468,512 in 2018 and $4,558,279 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Next item, HCA 2, Licensing Services for $474,790 in 2018 and $468,681 in 2019. Are there any questions?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Premier. Some time ago, a couple of years ago, I think there was a motion approved by the Legislative Assembly to remove the licensing of firearms from the sole purview of the Chief of Police and putting it under a committee. And there was another motion that dealt with non-lethal protections such as pepper spray and tasers and stuff. In a likelihood that any of that will be addressed in the near future under this vote.
Mr. Chairman,
I think
I don't know if the Leader of the Opposition recalls, but I actually moved that motion when I was in the opposition. That's how long ago that was.
It's still not been done.
I think
Your
it
mic
may-
on?
is your mic on, sir?
The mic is on.
Okay.
I think, I should say that over again. I said I actually moved a motion like that when I was in the opposition, so that's how long ago that was. I can't say much progress has been made since I have been in government the last time and this one. It is something that I think we need to look at again, but obviously, and I know because I've had the member from East End in particular talk to me, we're all concerned about
Protection for each to target.
well, yeah, but we're all concerned about the number of firearms that they are here illegally and not wanting ourselves to do anything to make the licensing process any more lax. I'm not suggesting it's lax now, but I mean to make it easier to get firearms. So it's something we have to look at very carefully. I'm not averse to looking at it at all, but
Not necessarily, Mr. Chair, not necessarily to make it any easier, but to make it fairer. I think there are many people in the community who believe that one person making such a decision can be perceived to be unfair, whether it is or not. I think a committee may make the same decision, but I think that decision made by the committee would be more acceptable to the community.
agreed, which is why I moved the motion all those many years ago. So I'm happy to look at that again.
Okay.
Member for East End.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's working.
You're on. It's working.
It is?
Yes, sir.
Can I hear myself? I must be going deaf.
Growing up,
Mr. Chairman, I believe the thing that is most vexing about the gun licensing is the inefficiencies of renewals. Once one person has received a gun license, we have to go back through the same thing over and over and over. Now, I understand the police record because there's a stretch of some 3 years that before you renew. It's not done on an annual basis. So you understand getting the police record because the police may miss, and we see what happened in America just recently. We should know that that person is still has a clean police record, no offenses that would prevent him from handling, using, or being licensed to use a firearm. But then you have to get pictures. You have to get them endorsed by a JP. You have to get recommendation letters again. Would it not be more efficient, since now you can go and pay for that police record, and they are custodians of that record, wouldn't that be sufficient for a renewal of that license?
Mr. Chairman, the excruciating exercise that the member from East End has just pointed out is not unique to the situation of firearm applications or renewals, but right across the full range of services the government provides where you have to make an application. So one of the important initiatives that we have progressed significantly and which we hope will become viral, to use that expression, is that the aim, and the Deputy Governor spoke to this when he made his contribution to the debate on the Budget Throne Speech and Policy Statement, is that once government, we want to get to a place where once government has your photo on file, your details on file, whichever department you go to make an application for whatever, the onus is on the department to get that information and not on the applicant to provide it again and again and again and again. So that's where we're aiming to get to with e-government and interconnectedness of government departments. It is not only possible, but it is fairly common in some jurisdictions. Doesn't matter which department you go into, they can dial in, or that's maybe the wrong expression, but they can access. They type in your name and your date of birth, and that information comes up. They do it in the UK. They do it in certain states in the United States. The technology is there. It's just a matter of us importing it, making it into, or converting it to suit our purposes, and using it. And I have a very, very strong supporter in the Deputy Governor on this initiative. So I am quite optimistic that it will actually happen throughout the public service, or throughout the civil service anyhow.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the Premier, and I wish him luck in tearing down those silos, because that's precisely what it is. Everybody wants to do their own little thing in isolation of each other, and they're all there to do one job and to make it one efficient service.
But we are making some real progress. You can now apply for your police license online, police record, or the lack thereof. You hope you don't have a police record, but the certificate that says you don't have a police record online, and a lot of the work at the General Registry with relation to companies and so forth can all be done online, and it's become very, very popular and getting very high ratings from the users. So we just need to get to a point where that kind of system, or the system, is available right across the full range of services that government provides. We actually need to aim, I believe, to get to a point where an applicant for a particular service of government has as little interaction with another human being as possible, so that you remove that element of the process, right? You apply online and you get it. You submit your applications online. You pay for your service, and when it's ready, you get it back and you print it off. So that's where we're aiming to get to. It won't happen overnight, but I'm really encouraged by the progress we've made over the last 4 or 5 years.
Member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the Honorable Premier, in terms of licensing security companies and security guards, are we licensing both? I know that's what it says here, but my understanding of it is that we may be only licensing the security companies.
Mr. Chairman, we're over into police now.
No, this HCA. Sorry, HCA.
Yeah, but that's a service provided by the police. So.
You want to wait till we get there then?
No, the commissioner's here. I'm just advising the committee that I don't have the answer myself. Hang on. Mr. Chairman, if the member could repeat the question, please.
Just in terms of licensing, good afternoon. In terms of licensing security companies and security guards, are we licensing both? And my question is in the line of how are we verifying the credentials of security guards? Is it merely that the security company presents them as a qualified security guard, or are we doing background checks? Are we doing checking credentials in whatever jurisdiction they may have worked in and so forth, if they're military, that sort of information?
Chairman, yes, sir. It's a full background check on each individual applicant. You do require a trade and business license to set up the company, the business aspect of it. And we are licensing individual officers, and we are doing the background checks across jurisdictions, wherever they might come from.
And that those checks are done, I'm assuming, through regular channels that you have established in those jurisdictions?
Yeah, they're carried out through our criminal records office, and we have a joint intelligence unit in our CIPS that conducts the checks and back to criminal records office who issued the certificate in.
And how confident are you that the information coming back from, because I noticed that there's security guards here from certain jurisdictions that have a much higher incidence of fraud and fake credentials and so on. How confident are you that we are turning over every stone, we're making sure that the information we're receiving is
Well, we're working
accurate?
within limited parameters, but reasonably confident that the information we have is correct. We have, at least on one occasion, found the information was incorrect, and we've revoked the license immediately. That's earlier this year. So it's intelligence-led, effectively.
Okay.
Member from East End.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I just ask if it is due diligence is done through Interpol.
I'm sorry, sir, the question?
If you conduct due diligence through Interpol.
We can. We take it wherever we have to take it. It may be relevant, it may not be relevant, depending on the jurisdiction we're inquiring from. If it's our nearest neighbour, we don't have to go through Europol, we have direct contact.
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
Member for Northside.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Chief of Police. Do you have any aversion to licensing tasers and pepper sprays to individuals for self-protection, given the increase in violent crime, particularly for women?
I do think, sir, it requires very, very careful consideration rather than a blanket say, yes, I would be agreeable to it. I think we'd have to look at it very, very carefully in terms of tasers and pepper sprays. I don't think there's any easy answer to that based on the communications I'm having with other police leaders around different jurisdictions.
Given that answer, what do you suggest that the more vulnerable in the society use for self-protection?
Well, we'd like to see the houses secure in the first place. Persons are protected within their own dwellings, And then we use an intelligence-led approach then to try and prevent the commission of those type of crimes that would impact on personal security.
There are no questions, further questions. I put the matter to ask all those in favor of HCA 2 licensing services for $474,790 in 2018 and $468,681 in 2019. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. HCA 5, Border Control Services for $4,718,995 in 2018 and $4,776,168 in 2019. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, recently I saw we're a joint task force of the police, immigration, customs, I believe. Detain certain people who had been overstaying. Is this an ongoing project? Do we have sufficient people in immigration? I know in 2005 to 2009, we had approved some 35 people to do some of that. Do we have sufficient staff at the immigration to do that? Because there are too many rumors of people who are illegally living on this island. And I know that immigration used to do a good job in the 90s with it. I haven't seen any real operations until recently. I saw where they stopped someone who had been on island 18 months over, something like that.
Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, I think we're actually probably doing more now than ever before. It's just that I suppose in the grand scheme of things, these offenses are sad to say, are less significant, considered less significant than in the context of the overall crime situation than hitherto was the case, because between 1st July 2016 and the 3rd of November this year, which is last week, there were 982 cases of arrests involving persons here illegally. The amount of cases where charges were laid and administrative fines imposed, 372. So a number of the cases obviously are still in the works. So it's not as though they're doing less. It's just, as I say, it's not making the waves it once did.
Okay, all right, I hear you, but that's a significant amount of people who are overstaying.
I should say, though, Minister, that these days a lot of them are dealt with administratively so that you don't have to run through all of the court thing.
And that's precisely where I was going. Right. Yeah, I recognize that the immigration has we gave them that authority 8 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe, less than that, maybe, to do administrative fines.
But
my concern,
Mr. Chairman, with the members' permission, just to make sure that I don't mislead the committee, those are not just overstaying cases; those that relate to work permit breaches and so forth as well.
Right, and I understand that breaches of this one didn't know, and that one didn't know, and the employer didn't do it, and the likes and what have you, and then they assess it. But my concern, not those, because those are mistakes, omissions, or what have you, but people still get fined for them. My concern is those who are deliberate have deliberately overstayed, and in many instances there is intelligence from immigration police and the stuff like that, and I don't want to know what that is. That's not my business. I just want to know what percentage of those 900 we got in that situation where we PI'd during that period. If we have it. Yeah. The persona non grata,
Well, Mr. Chairman,
prohibited immigrant, I think we call
understand,
it.
but it is not very common for someone to be PI'd simply for overstaying. Or what we often find is that overstaying is one of the long range or the large number, significant number of offenses the individual may have committed. These days, certainly since I've been in cabinet, we don't. I can't remember one instance where there's been a recommendation for PI purely on the basis of overstaying.
And forgive me if I mix this up, but PI is a tool that the chief immigration officer uses. Deportation is cabinet.
No, it's cabinet is who declares someone a prohibited immigrant.
Member for Boddentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an observation. I noticed just looking at the 2016, 2017, 18-month forecast and just kind of annualizing that number, it comes out to roughly 4.8 million. And I noticed that for 2018 and 2019, the number is less. So I'm just curious in terms of why the government, just more an observation in terms of what's driving a cost reduction. If anything, I would have expected that to have increased. So that's just more of an observation than anything else, but I'm sure there's probably a reason for it.
Are you speaking in reference to HCA 5, sir?
That is correct. Because what I noticed is that if you look at the quantity of services, the measures, it is actually increasing year on year.
Okay.
But the actual cost is going down when you kind of annualize it. So I'm just being curious as to the decrease.
Okay.
I would have expected it to have gone up, really, seeing that they would be expected to do more.
Mr. Chairman, the change, the projected change is not, I wouldn't say it's not material, but it's not that significant. I think the bigger point that the member from Boddentown West is making is that he would expect that the number should be climbing.
Correct. Well,
Right. Right.
Based on the
Right.
quantity going up.
But this is a reflection of the expected changes of responsibility as we move from the current arrangement to an HR department and we separate out the functions.
Okay.
That's so it's been lumped.
No, I was just curious, because I see the quantity going up.
Yeah, that's the
but the
accountant in you.
cost going down.
That's
so
the
just-
accountant in you. I got it.
Yeah. And I just need to make sure that the immigration department is properly resourced. It's the border protection we need to make sure that they have the tools to do their job.
Yeah.
Mr. Member for Northside.
Through you, through you, Mr. Chairman, I asked a question here because I'm not sure whether this chief officer is responsible for passports because I don't see anything under the deputy governor for passports.
Yeah, that's this ministry.
Okay. But I'll ask the question here then. Why are Caymanians being told that they have to appear in person for renewal of their passports, especially students away at school, having to come home simply to appear in person and present an application for a passport renewal.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're all aware that a couple of years ago now, the UK repatriated responsibility for the issue of all British passports. So they are really directing the traffic. And we no longer have some of the leeway that we previously did with respect to these matters, because we no longer actually issue the Cayman passport at all ourselves. What the chief officer has just explained to me is that there's a delegation from here going up to the UK early next year to sit down and try to talk face to face with the people who are administering this policy in Her Majesty's Passport Office, and to explore the possibility of Caymanians, who, particularly those who are overseas, being able to apply for these passports online, to avoid the situation that you speak about, of which we are aware.
But they can apply for the UK passport online. But it's only the Cayman passport that they're being told.
Right.
And there's nothing in the law that I am aware or in the documentation that says the person has to appear in person. If you submit, or you get your mother or your father to go to the passport office and submit a completed application, that should be sufficient. I don't think there's anything in the British Nationality Act or in the Cayman legislation but people are being flown home by their parents because, and I think that the passport office is advising them incorrectly.
No, they're not. They're following a directive from Her Majesty's Passport Office. It's a policy. That's why I explained that the ministry is seeking to sit down face to face with them to explore other possibilities to avoid this grave inconvenience and expense on the part of Caymanians, because as you say, you can apply for the UK passport online.
I won't cover that policy from the UK.
Are there other questions? Member from East End.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to, not to challenge the Premier, but this thing on PI, I was looking for the law, but they don't have any printed. I always thought that was the chief immigration officer had the flexibility up to 5 years. That is prohibited immigrant. And if I'm just not clear on it whether it is cabinet or immigration, the chief immigration officer, and the chief immigration officer is here. So, and those were the ones I was asking about.
No, whatever practices may have been, or perhaps even still are, the chief immigration officer does not have the power to declare a person a prohibited immigrant.
Nor a deported person. That both of those go to cabinet, right?
Mr. Chairman, I would really appreciate if the member didn't push me down the road on this one, because it's going to be counterproductive.
Okay. Could we ask if we
I'll
could?
have a word with him separately.
Yeah, I was going to ask if we could have that discussion separately. There are no further questions, then I put
Mr.
the question
Chairman.
to you all.
Mr. Chairman?
Oops, sorry.
Just under number of cruise ship passenger arrivals and processed, I noticed that there's no projected change in that area. I'm not quite understanding where that information is coming from, because everything else that we've heard indicates that there is going to be an increase in that in number of cruise ship
Sorry, Mr.
passengers.
Chairman, I didn't get the first bit.
Just the number of cruise ship passengers they're expecting to process. There's no change from 2016-17 to 2018.
Mr.
But-
Mr. Chairman, I'm sure that the member will take the opportunity to cross-examine the Minister for Tourism when his turn comes about that. But I believe the situation is that unless and until we have a cruise berthing facility or ability to accommodate significantly greater numbers of cruise passengers is limited, not just by our capacity to do it, but by the unwillingness of the cruise companies to send their bigger ships to a place that doesn't have proper cruise berthing.
Mr. Chairman, why I asked the question is that in a lot of, I think, the information presented here during the budget debate, all indications were is that cruise passenger arrivals were increasing. So I was just curious as to where these figures were coming from. But we'll discuss it, I guess, further with the Minister of Tourism when we get there.
Mr. Chairman, just to make sure we're all operating on the same premise, the 2016, 2017, 18-month forecast, it's an 18-month, is 2.2 to 2.5 million. The 2018 annualized forecast is 1.5 to 1.7. And in 2019, again, 1.5 to 1.7. So that is, I think, an increase, although not huge.
If there are no other questions.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that's why we were questioning why the cost is going up. But if you look at airline passengers in that same category, I think that one stayed flat. So my apologies, I may have misspoke when I said.
So Mr. Chairman, the question, what's the question? Though?
Airline passengers.
Right.
That one stays flat if you annualize it from 2016, 17.
Right, and the question is?
Where are we getting that information from in terms of why is it staying flat? Why are we not projecting at least a small increase? Just based on what was presented here to us, we anticipated that there would be some increase in air arrivals as well.
Mr. Chairman, I think that question is better saved for the Minister of Tourism, because I would have to go and inquire, because I don't.
I would agree. Are there other questions? All those in favor of HCA 5 Border Control Services in the amount of $4,718,995 in 2018 and $4,776,168 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. HCA 6 Human Resource Services, $5,842,798 in 2018 and $5,922,288 in 2019. Are there any questions? Member for Northside.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, this subhead includes DLP3, DLP4, which has to do with supervision, compliance, and awareness for pensions and labor. I think it's been quite a while since we've had a report from the pensions department tabled. Is there any likelihood that we will see some greater effort on the compliance aspect of the requirements of the national pension legislation?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just have a moment to get the Director of
Yes, sir.
labor and pensions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have present the Director of Labor and Pensions, Mr. Bernard Ebanks, and I would ask him, Mr. Chairman, to answer the question.
Mr. Ebanks, before you actually respond, would you mind stating your name and your position for the record?
Good afternoon. Ben Banks, Director of Labor and Pensions. Through you, Mr. Chair, we are in the process of finalizing most of the annual reports. Some of those annual reports had to be redesigned. We're also looking at outsourcing some of those annual reports in order to increase efficiency on it.
When was the last time a report was tabled?
I do believe that would have been 2008, sir.
You're currently consuming $1.374 million, and you because of the complexity in the redesign, you're looking at outsourcing it, or what is the justification to outsourcing these reports?
And well, it's a matter of complexity. It's a matter of resources as well as professional presentation. This is something that has been hindering the output of the reports. And since I've taken over DLP, that is one of the things that I recognize in order for us to meet our obligations on it. I believe that is the best way forward. And when I mentioned that, really it's a matter of us going to GIS, and GIS is in the process now of looking at some of those annual reports in order to get those assist us with those shortly.
So are you planning to do a complete backdate and deliver all of the annual reports that are missing, or?
That is correct, sir. We're hoping that will be completed short.
So how are we to have any confidence that the private sector pension plans are complying with the legislation? How often do you do inspections? What generates your inspections? Do you generate your inspections based on what the law requires, or do you rely on complaints from individuals? Or
Sorry, can you repeat that?
how do you generate your inspections for compliance? Is it based on particular requirements of the legislation, or is it based on complaints from individuals?
It's a combination, through you, Mr. Chair, it's a combination of different matters. We do pension complaints from individual employees. There's also a confidential tips line that we will have information, encourage people to send in information for, and as well, we will do compliance checks, proactive compliance checks through our inspections unit as well.
How many inspections do you do on an annual basis?
One moment, I'll have those figures for you. We did have 136 total audits and inspections done for the period.
Are you in a position to say whether those audits demonstrated compliance or non-compliance with the law?
There were files that did reveal that there was non-compliance in there, and we have referred matters to the DPP and some cases are actually in court as well.
You're also responsible for labor as well.
Correct, sir.
Okay. This vote also includes NWD3, Labor Market Information and Research. Can you tell us where the new labor legislation is at the time? Are you operating under the old labor law?
We are currently operating under the 2011 labor law. The labor relations bill was finalized. The final draft had been done, and it was a matter of having it sent to, I think it was cabinet, I do believe. It was with the ministry though, but the bill itself has been substantially complete the draft.
I have other questions, Mr. Chairman, but not to him.
Okay. Any other questions? Member from East End.
Mr. Chairman, I see where there is it appears like it is anticipated that there will be an increase in the maybe status grants and the like. And I'm wondering, status grant and permanent residence application, and I'm wondering if this is going to require additional staff based on what is currently reported in the newspaper, that the delays are causing nothing but problems, and further people are getting judicial reviews or applying for judicial reviews as a result of the delays, and I'm wondering if new staff, additional staff, is going to be employed to make this a little more efficient.
Premier.
Mr. Chairman, we are actually making very good headway. There's a story on Cayman News Service, and one knows anything you read there is gospel. Which indicates that over 300 people who had been part of the backlog of permanent residency applications have now been granted that residency. Immigration administrative staff and the Caymanian Status and Permanent Residency Board have considered 623 applications and made decisions on 449 of them. The backlog, which was well over 1,000 when the consideration of applications began again in May, now stands at 825 as applications have been added to the numbers as the boards and staff continue their work. It goes on to say, although government appears to have got to grips with the controversial situation that caused the application process to stall, legal cases continue through the courts, with some applicants seeking damages over the excessive delay of their applications as well as the outcome. Mr. Chairman, since this government took office, we have taken some fairly aggressive steps to come to grips with this situation. Before the elections, we had changed certain of the regulations to allow the process which had been stalled for some years, that is the permanent residency application process, to resume. And we took further steps to appoint and train administrative staff to be able to deal with some of these permanent residency applications. And I have to say the process is working quite well. I don't think we will ever reach a point when there is zero number of applications in the queue, but the backlog has been significantly reduced, and obviously the overriding consideration was to have dealt with the long-standing applications that had been there. Whatever fallout there is from a legal standpoint, we'll have to consider and deal with as that comes. But I think the situation is well under control. What we do need to press ahead with, though, are some significant a review, and what I expect would be some significant changes to the application process to deal with the problems which had derailed the application process. Members of the committee will know that essentially to get it to move forward, we've eliminated consideration of the job or the profession aspect of the criteria that in the longer term is not satisfactory. And there are other problems which were identified during the Rich review, which we are working to address in legislative form, which will have to come obviously to the House for consideration in due course. But in terms of the current backlog, I think we're doing very well. And I'm very satisfied with the way things are going.
Mr. Chairman, saying that he said that Danny Gospel on CNS, is he verifying that those numbers are correct that he read out if he was reading from there?
No, Mr. Speaker, I was simply reading the report. I don't know off the top of my head what the current numbers are, but I expect that they would have been derived from the weekly update that we give now with respect to how the process is going.
So all right. There are no verifiable ones then.
You can verify them, yeah.
Member for Savannah. I think you might need to turn that off. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Premier. He mentioned the Rich report. What's the status of that? Will that be released public at some time?
Well, I suppose that at some time there are no plans, no current plans to do it. It is legal advice to the government, which is providing us with the guidance we need to address what are significant issues with respect to the immigration legislation. I am not about to put that in the hands of lawyers who are filing suits against the government every other day with respect to immigration matters. Let them get their own legal advice.
Member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the area of, sorry, I lost my focus just now. The health and safety inspections, occupational. Could you give us some indication of what's involved in those inspections? How involved they are?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, could the member repeat the information requested?
Yeah, in the occupational safety and health inspections. Your department is responsible for those, right?
Correct, sir.
Okay. Just want to get some information on how involved they are, what's involved in those inspections, what you're looking for,
While the inspections team is out on the road, they do proactive inspections. They look for basic safety equipment, whether it's harnesses, protective equipment, helmets, visible attire that would be identifiable so that minimize accidents, and the use and safety equipment, etc.
And thank you. In if someone was to be chosen to perform those inspections, I'm assuming they would have to have certain credentials, training, background experience in order to be able to effectively carry them out. How many persons in your department now are actually qualified to perform those inspections?
Our head of inspections, Mr. Gene Hydes, is actually OSHA certified, and he can certify other individuals as well. And that's another area that I've looked to increase our resilience at. And we recently had 3 officers, including the head of inspections, attend a training course in Jamaica for the National Examinations Board of Occupational Safety. And that's a program that I want to continue in order to focus with that as well.
So you now have, I think you said you had 3 that just were trained, and not including the obviously the manager then. So you have 4.
Through you, Mr. Chair, correct. We're looking to finalize the other, the 3 in order to do the NEBOSH certification, but the head of inspections is actually a certified trainer under OSHA.
Okay. But I just noticed because I saw that and the projected increase in the number of inspections, but I knew that from experience that you were a little bit weak in that area. So I wanted to make sure that that was being covered because I know how important that is. But thank you.
Member for Bowden Town West, followed by the member from West Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious. I noticed that the year-on-year annualized cost is jumping up roughly by 35% or 1.5 million. But what I'm trying to get a breakdown of in terms of the increase is that I noticed the amount of permits being processed is also increasing significantly, but also equally, I guess to the government's credit, is that they're also increasing the number of training workshops to improve workforce readiness. What I'm trying to determine is of that 1.5 million, roughly how much of it represents training or an increase in training for Caymanians.
NWDA, I think is referring to. No. NWDA.
Mr. Chairman, that's a question for the NWDA, which is separate and distinct from the Department of Labor and Pensions. So I'll have to ask.
No, well, I'm just looking at we're in HCA 6, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have a section there that says number of training workshops. It's just there, so that's why I'm asking a question. So isn't the NWDA part of it will be from this vote, correct?
All right, let's see if we can identify what we're talking about.
Yes, sorry. I mean, if it's, I mean, sorry, in the interest of time, Mr. Chairman, I mean, I have no problem in terms of saving the question when we get to the NWDA, but I'm just curious in terms of just the portion that would go towards training. So this is something that can wait. I don't think we should hold up the committee or this vote pending the answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm fine to wait, Mr. Premier.
From West Bay.
Mr. Chairman, through you, right now the going price for a hairdresser and a lot of these salons that are out there are $150 a salary of $150 a week. You got people working in these waitresses and stuff making less than that when the law says a minimum of $6 an hour. How is your staff trained and how are you all, do you have the ability to go out and find these things out? Because I know the places, I know the people who are doing it, but no one is being convicted. Is your officers being trained to pick up on these things? How do you check these people out?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The inspections unit, the labor unit, and the pensions unit, all 3 substantive units within the DLP, have been briefed and trained on the law in order to look for all aspects that would indicate something is below minimum wage. And that is a component in every inspection that is carried out, whether it's reactive, proactive, that is so.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So, like I've done before, because I will let the committee know, I've worked closely with the gentleman speaking, Mr. Ebanks, and he's very professional, very thorough. So if the members continue to bring your staff these things, the one thing I'm not seeing is convictions. How do we go about disciplining these companies that continue to pay hairdressers $150 a week, but yet they're working 8 or 9 hours a day, one day off, and on weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they're working 10 hours each day. So they're going well across to 45 hours, and they're still only getting paid $150 a week. And this is not a one beauty salon thing, this is across the island. How will these things be addressed?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Like I said, the proactive and reactive measures are there. There's also, we encourage the public and employees to use a confidential tips line to provide any tips to DLP. But we are actively pursuing those employers who would breach any of the legislation. And as a matter of fact, we have a total of 7 employers currently in court for minimum wage infractions.
Okay, beautiful. And last, through you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your patience. I have with me here 10 complaints on an individual at a company right next door to us over here. 10 complaints that went to the labor board, 10 complaints that went to the immigration board, yet this individual was still rewarded with permanent residence. How much does the immigration board come to you all for information on individuals who are applying for PR, etc.? What is the what is the go between you all and the boards? Do the boards come to you and say, do you have any complaints on these individuals, etc., etc.?
Mr. Chair, through you, to my recollection, I don't think that is something that we ever shared as enforcement agencies.
Thank you.
The Immigration Department and Labor and Pensions regularly share intelligence.
You do?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Because the 10 copies of the 10 signed signatures by 10 Caymanians on one individual went to Labor Board and to the Immigration Board, and the individual was still given permanent residence. I was just wondering if there's any synergy between you guys working together for these type of oversights. But thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
I think I'm from the side.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, could you tell me when last an inspector been out to my constituency? Because I can think of 3 construction sites that I drove across this morning, and I would be hard pressed to see a helmet or any other kind of safety equipment, some of them working on 2-story buildings.
My apologies. I don't have the information broken down by district. So I wouldn't have that information, but I could get it for you.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'm just trying to find out if there's any information that is relayed to work permit holders through your agency or immigration, because you brought up the communications between the agencies in respect to an employer violating the laws themselves, an employee violating the laws themselves. Because following up from Bernie's question or in thought process is sometimes not only the employer or employers are in violation, but the employee knowingly are also violating by way of, for example, that hairstylist that is getting paid $185 a week, working 90 hours, has accepted that they won't be paid enough money for their work, but are willing to take a lot less. So you have both parties violating the law, and there's no way in the world that an employee is going to rat on themselves to call a tip line. So basically my question is, how do you find persons who are violating the immigration law in respect to that if both persons are in agreement, accomplice to the violation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, relative to any immigration offense matter, whether it's an employee or an employer, we endeavor to share that information with the immigration department. And like I stated earlier, we do share information on a regular basis. So it does happen.
Just to follow up to you, Mr. Chair, I guess my question is there any information relayed to employees? I know that most employers are well aware of the immigration laws and the violations of them because they go through the business application process and are quite familiar. But I don't know if there's any process upon which, when granting work permits for an individual, if they're aware that if they accept less knowingly for their convenience of staying here or the likes, that they could be in violation themselves.
Like I said, the information is shared relative to employees and employers with any violations. I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question correctly, but employees and employers, any information that comes to our attention, that is shared with the immigration department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All those in favor of eight? Sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
yeah, I don't have any more labor questions, but I have immigration questions.
Okay. We're on HCA 6, Human Resources Services. Okay, member for Northside, go ahead.
For you, Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the Premier could tell us exactly how many work permits we currently have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, there are currently, make sure I get the date right, as of 30th of June. As of 30th of June.
Is it November?
There was 24,830 work permits in effect, of which 19,577 were full-time and 4,097 were temporary.
In given those answers, Mr. Premier, you might want to look at the budget estimates, page 191. And under this head, we have a projected for 18 and 19, 26 to 36,000 work permits as a total of temporaries and annual work permits. And the breakdown on 191 is 13,000 of each. I think you might want to address that. Those numbers may need some adjusting. It does come back to the 26,000, and then the 218 comes back to the 36, and they remain the same for the 2 years. But I don't believe that we've ever had a situation where temporary permits equaled annual work permits.
I agree, Mr. Chairman. There seems to be something wrong with those figures. We'll look at it.
Okay. The other question I have is in regards to the business staffing plans. IMM 11. We're talking only 25 to 35.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, where?
Page 193 in the big book.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. It says number of business staffing plan applications processed, 25 to 35. I don't think that is likely to include renewals, because I would hazard a guess that they are substantially more than 25 to 30 business staffing plan permits, because the law says anybody with, 15 employees must have a business staffing plan.
I'll see if I can get the answer, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Member for Buttontown West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just through you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm still trying to get the answer for.
Okay. Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, I just want to
Hang on. He's going to try to get the information to answer his question right now.
Okay.
Okay. So just hold your question until.
Sorry, Mr.
Get
Chairman, my little brain can't manage more than 2 questions at once. Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, sir.
could we move on to take the other question while I get this? Because, again, there seems to be, it appears that there is a typo with respect to 2019, because that's more than doubling the projected number. But the answer is that these are new applications, and that business staffing plans are not granted for 1 year, but for longer periods.
Yes.
So it's not every year that they'd come up for renewal.
Okay.
But this number, we need to check this number, because it appears to be more than a doubling of the projected number of business staffing plans in the next year. I know the economy is growing, but still, I want to check that.
Member for Buttontown West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following up on what the Premier said earlier, where he indicated that there were 24,830 work permits as of the 30th of June 2017. I'm looking at the annual economic report, and it reports a number of 17,482 as at the 31st of December 2016, which would then imply that we had an increase of 7,348 within a 6-month period in terms of the number of work permits. I find that very unlikely, and I would also appreciate if the Premier, I recognize that he wouldn't have the time now, but that's a big jump between the 31st of December 2016 and the 30th of June 2017.
I agree with the member, Mr. Chairman, and I suspect that they have not included the temporaries. But we can check that.
Yeah, well, this is actually just the full people who are they basically have 3 categories between Caymanian, PRs, and non-Caymanian. So I'm assuming that the temporary would still include the non-Caymanian, but 7,348 is a big jump.
It should, but I agree with you. I don't think that's possible.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll check.
Thanks, Mr. Premier.
Member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, just going back to the information the Premier is trying to locate now, is he trying to find out how many business staffing plans we have in total? Or
No, that wasn't the question, Mr.
Okay.
Chair. I was trying to find out whether or not the number that is projected here for 2019 is correct. Because I've been told these are new applications. So the 2016, 2017, 18-month forecast had 60 to 70. And the forecast for 2018 is 25 to 35, but then it jumps to 60 to 70. These are new
Yeah.
applications for 2019.
Okay.
That strikes me as being. Right. So I've just been advised the business staffing plans are granted for 5 years initially.
But my question now, Mr. Chairman, is how are we ensuring compliance with the conditions of a business staffing plan in relation to obligations placed on the employers? I give an example, scholarships. How are we going about ensuring that these companies are providing the scholarships? Are we auditing that? Who's monitoring that? How is it being done?
Mr. Chairman, the answer is we're not doing a very good job at all with respect to those matters. And we have not, I think, ever done a good job with monitoring how well employers are complying with the conditions that are imposed on these business staffing plans. And that is one of the areas that we are going to address by virtue of the work we are doing with the development of the new HR department, which, as I say, will amalgamate the functions of immigration and have responsibility for things like business staffing plans. Quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, for many years, and I mean for many years on my part, I have wondered about the value of the business staffing plan regime as it currently operates. And I think we need to take a long, hard look at it and see if there's not ways we can either improve this or replace it with a system that actually works both for the employer and for the Caymanian employee who is seeking to move up get employment first and then to move up the ranks within these organizations. We have to find a way to make the employer more accountable and hold them to the conditions to which they've agreed in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Honorable Premier. I completely, wholeheartedly agree with the Premier. I just did some quick math, and because I actually FOI'd information, and the response I got back from the Immigration Department is that they couldn't tell me. In short, I'm summarizing. They're not able to tell me with any accuracy how many scholarships are in those plans. Now, if you do the quick math using the government's $20,000 per person, if they have about 500 to 600 business staffing plans on record, and each one of those is supposed to provide just one scholarship, and assuming it's $20,000 a year, that's $10 million right there. All that money could be going to education. So I agree with you with the urgency. We have people struggling now to pay for tertiary education. This is where it should come from, and I would add that I would make a recommendation, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, that this be managed by the Scholarship Secretariat rather than the Immigration Department. I think then you may get the results you're looking for.
I don't disagree with anything the member has said, Mr. Chairman, anything at all. I think the recommendation for the responsibility for managing the scholarship, once once the undertaking has been given to provide it, should go somewhere else other than under what will be the new Human Resource Department.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Are there other questions? All those in favor of HCA 6, HCA 6, Human Resource Services, in the amount of $5,842,798 in 2018, and $5,922,288 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill. Please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. HCA 8, Police Security Services, in the amount of $1,077,602 in 2018 and $1,065,577 in 2019. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, I put the question. All those in favor of HCA
sorry.
8?
I have some questions, Mr. Chairman. Apologies. I'm just
Member for Bordentown West?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just checking my notes here. The one thing that jumped out, Mr. Chairman, is that I noticed under the quality section there were, I guess, material changes or significant changes from the outputs last year, as opposed to this year. And I noticed like some things were actually reduced. Now, it is actually quite a good amount, and I really don't want to take up the committee time. But if it is okay with the Premier and the Commissioner, that's one of the things I would like to sit with them separately and have a discussion to understand. There are quite a good amount of stuff that has been omitted or changed from last year's budget, and I just want, for my own understanding, to find out why those measures or KPIs were excluded.
Okay. Premier?
Mr. Chairman, I could attempt an answer. It's an effort on the part of the Commissioner of Police to create greater accountability, but I think it's probably best if he comes and explains to the committee how he gets here.
Commissioner, before you answer, may I just ask that you state your name and your position for the record?
Yes, Chairman. Derek Byrne, Commissioner of Police, Royal Cayman Islands Police Service.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if I might ask the member to restate
Oh,
the
sorry.
question.
No, thank you, Commissioner. I noticed just looking at the year-on-year movements in terms of the measurement, and I recognize that you weren't here last year, neither was I, but there were some changes in the measurement in terms of the number of outputs, and they were actually quite a good amount from last year to this year. So I was wondering as to the omission of those or the exclusion of those KPIs or those measurements from last year to this year. And I wonder if it's maybe a change in strategy or is just something that has been moved someplace else.
I would submit that it's a bit of all strategy and a change in focus. That one of my functions when I took up duty there just a year ago or so was to review the way we operated root and branch. So the focus then is on community policing and service delivery, frontline service delivery. So where there might be apparent reductions in some areas, there are increases in a lot of other areas, right across the full suite of services provided by RCIPS to the community, right across the islands. So I would hope that we have a better fit-for-purpose policing service. At least that's the objective, right throughout the suite of services we provide to the communities.
No, I'm on HCA 8.
You have further questions, member from Bordentown West?
No, Mr. Chairman, I will just send my the stuff that jump out in a separate email to the Commissioner. Like I said, if the services remain the same, whether one service has reduced and one has increased, we will still expect some level of measurement. But at the same time, I do recognize that crime and the police is a big thing within the community, and I don't think that going through Finance Committee with the issues that we may have, this will probably take a whole day within itself, and I really don't want to hold it up. But I'll just send a separate email to the Commissioner outlining my questions.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Not? I put all those in favor of HCA 8 Police Security Services in the amount of $1,077,602 in 2018 and $1,065,577 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. HCA 10 Police Criminal Justice Services in the amount of $355,912 in 2018 and $331,710 in 2019. Are there any questions?
Again,
Member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the Premier can tell us these summonses and execution of warrants, are we still using police officers to do that? Because this has been a matter of contention for quite some time. We believe that it was a wasting our police time. And I know we had some retirees or something that were doing it, some people who had retired from the force and came back on. But I think it was decided a long time ago to reinstate those people in the police force and get wardens to do this, because we had done some amendments to legalize wardens of the court doing that.
Okay, sir, it's a two-pronged response to that. The warrants remains a firm function of the police service, and the summonses itself were in the final transition stages of transferring from police to court services. We've had several meetings, and we would hope to move pretty quickly from now to service of summonses by court-appointed officers.
Yeah, and warrants, that's true. Warrants is your responsibility to execute those bench warrants and the like.
Sir.
But those summonses, because we still have these police officers, and one of the concerns that was raised, if some of those police officers wanted to transition to the courts to do that summons, to serve summons, then if they would go across and with no less benefit, I think that's what, and I believe it was agreed that that would happen. And that would ease up positions for the police department to hire additional people.
Yeah, I mean, the final modalities are just being worked on as we speak, but we'd expect to transition very shortly fully to the court services. That function, shed that function.
And Mr. Chairman, I wonder if we can hear how many there are that is doing that out of the police service. How many personnel?
Sorry, we had 6 in what's called the process unit, 1 sergeant plus 5 officers.
Well,
it's fair to say they perform a few other functions in addition to just service of summonses.
And Mr. Chairman, I wonder if we can hear if they make up the total complement of the police service? Are they included in the total complement that is recorded as police officers?
Yes, sir, they count as part of my head count, yes.
And that has been the concern, because then the police is short of 6, at least 6, that is not actually doing police work.
Well, predominantly they engage in the service of summonses, but they are available for other services as required. For instance, Pirates Week or some special duties that are required. So they are available to us, but the primary task is the service of summonses.
Right, and I think we understand that, but their primary task being that 8 to 5 and only special occasion that they are used elsewhere takes them nevertheless away from the police force for the primary task of policing.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
We need to get that straight.
Member for North Side, and then the member for
Mr. Chairman, just again, a little bit of correction to the figures here, because if you look at this coming down from 1.6 million to 331,000, one would draw the conclusion that it's a 70% reduction in money for the police, which in fact it is not, because if you go to page 205 of the big book, you will see that there should be a statement down the bottom that 999,000 is provided from other sources to bring this back up to what it should be, 1-point-something million.
Yes.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Okay.
And you'll find that consistent. You'll find that in several places throughout the budget statements. The next one I have would be the member for Savannah, and then the member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just first of all, indicate to the new commissioner the stability he seemed to have brought to the force here. I know you inherited this serving of summons and warrants, etc. I know it's probably at one stage close to 1,000. The question maybe not to you, but whether to the Attorney General, is there a statute of limitation or a time limit? Because I know some of these go back several years. What happens in those instances?
Well, again, we differentiate between summonses and warrants in terms of the warrants are written commands to the police service to execute immediately with no discretion. The summonses, then there is a 6-month time limit for institution and then immediate service before the court date. We're up to date with the service of summonses as it stands, and we have reduced our warrant count considerably over the last 12 months to quite a manageable level at this stage.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, the question may not necessarily directly be to the police commissioner, but rather to the premier. But it's under this appropriation in respect to criminal records. As an MLA in my constituency, I found that some of the difficulties for the young people and anybody who's seeking employment is sometimes the cost of a police record that is necessary to find employment. I was wondering if it's allowed within the law to possibly consider allowing a police record for mainly for employment purposes. It will be specified for employment purposes only, to be at a reduced price, because we don't want to create any more hindrances for them to get employment, but still maintain the revenue for all the other purposes of a police record. Is that something that can be accomplished?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, a police record is only $25. I don't know how much lower we could reduce it.
Mr. Chair.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I just to add some information. There, from the last administration, there was a relationship that I think has been established between the NWDA for this purpose, as in ensuring that people can access job opportunities and employment opportunities as it relates to having the police clearance. So that is something that I think people can actually work through the NWDA, unless things have changed since the last administration. But as I said, I don't know where we are at now, but we certainly took that in consideration when we made certain policy changes through the NWDA.
Mr. Chairman, just to verify what the minister is saying. But
Again, I'm not here to say exactly what the situation is. I just know that there was a consideration that was made with people applying for jobs, and I think it may have been specifically via the NWDA's portal or services. Again, I'm not, and I don't want to say something that may then turn around being not the case. I just know it was certainly something that was discussed and considered in making sure that we didn't have certain barriers to certain people trying to access employment. That's as most as I can say at this point.
Mr. Chairman, just to verify what the minister is saying, because I've actually assisted people, quite a number of people actually, in being able to get police records by going through NWDA. So that does exist as an option, just for the members' information.
Premier.
And there's, Mr. Chairman, there's the time-honored tradition of members of the Legislative Assembly helping their constituents pay for these things.
But through you, Mr. Chairman, the answer to that has to be that no employer should be allowed to demand a police record from a prospective employee unless he's offering them a contract of employment. The idea that Caymanians have to submit police records on application is ludicrous. The employer should not be allowed to demand a police record unless he's offering a contract of employment.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, sir. I'm just looking on the timeliness section. There is a metric there that says prosecutions within 6 months of coming to police notice. And I noticed that the measurement is roughly between, well, according to them, achieving 90 to 100% rate. And then also accused persons processed within legal guidelines. That first one, their prosecutions within 6 months of coming to police notice, is that something realistic that we should have as a measurement here? Because in many cases, I don't think that's the case.
Commissioner?
Sorry. Those are the outer limits, in fact, sir. The idea would be that in summary cases, we have our cases presented to DPP within 2 months. In more complex cases, 3 months, and 6 months is at the very outset. And when they get to court is a different issue in terms of decision back. But in summary offences, we're obliged to have the proceedings instituted within 6 months, or they become statute barred, exactly as a matter of law.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Member for East End? Okay. Other questions? All those in favor of HCA 10, Police Criminal Justice Services, in the amount of $355,912 in 2018 and $331,710 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. HCA 14, Protection and Investigative Services, in the amount of $37,614,198 in 2018 and $38,625,869 in 2019. Are there any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Member for Northside.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Chief of Police, why are we limiting the helicopter, the aerial patrol, to approximately 1 hour per day?
That's the cumulative. That's the cumulative total of patrol time, as opposed to going up and going down. It's the time they're actually up and down, and it's an aggregate figure. Some days it'll be more, some days it'll be less. It could be 3 and 4 hours. Some days it'll be depending on downtime. For instance, it's down now for the next 4 days for fitting of equipment, but the hours will be made up on an aggregate figure over the course of the year.
But shouldn't we be aiming, even with that aggregate, there's 24 hours in a day, and given that it's going to be down for services, etc., should we be aiming for much more patrol hours than that?
And that's minimum. It's what we can do after that. We have 2 pilots.
No, sir, I don't say minimum. That says number, and that's what the budget is based on.
Okay, and I get that, sir. I appreciate that.
I have the same control about the patrolling for the Marine. We're looking at 3.5 hours a day.
But those are aggregate, those are average figures.
Yeah, but I want to know that the Marine patrols are out there every day for more than 3.5 hours. I mean, we know where the contraband is coming by sea, and if we're only budgeting to provide 3.5 hours a day out of a 24-hour day. something.
Mr. Chairman.
Member for East End.
Mr. Chairman, I want to get ask some question of the Premier or Commissioner, but I understand if you go around some bends and turn it into street and keep hiding from me on these, I'm easy with that. Do we have sufficient resources to patrol this country?
We're talking about border resources.
And the Premier said in his debate, in his presentation, that the government is moving towards creating a Coast Guard, which should have been done from 2005, 2009, really. But the Premier may want to answer this. Are we, let's say, ask how far ahead we are on that. What is the progress on creating a robust Coast Guard?
Mr. Chairman, we're just at the start of this exercise. We've been in government now, this government, for 5 months. This is a new initiative, relatively new initiative, although it's been talked about before. That's why there is provision in the current budget, significant new provision for the establishment of a proper border control unit and the start of the development of a Coast Guard. There's no secret. We know that this is hugely under-resourced, and it is going to take in significant number of years and many millions of dollars to get to the point where we can say that we have a truly effective Coast Guard. But there are other means, given particularly the technology that is available now, of an intelligence-led decision-making about where to target the resources that you have, that the police and the other border control agencies are using. We don't want to get into too much detail about that, but it's not just a case of having 24/7 boats patrolling the island and the aircraft in the air for all hours of the day and night. It has to be based on intelligence and the use of technology, so that you have maximum optimal use of the limited resources that we have. Anything that the Commissioner would like to add, he's free to do so, but I'm just saying where we are.
No, that's fine. I just need one more question, but I just want the Premier to know that you're not going to get any resistance from me on that regard. Whatever we have to spend to protect the borders, then I'm on board with that. Pardon the pun. I'm on deck. This question is general. Is there going to be a policy, i.e. from the government or the Commissioner or the police department, on the structure of this Coast Guard as to whether or not it's just going to be police officers, or we're going to invite volunteers, because many Coast Guard regimes are made up of volunteers as well. Are we going to invite volunteers with the requisite experience, training, and what have you to do that?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we've reached that point in the decision-making process. We are seeking expert advice, principally from the UK, with respect to how we go about developing this agency. And I guess in due course, those decisions will get taken.
Member for Savannah.
Mr. Chairman, through you to the Commissioner or the Premier, is this the heading for traffic also?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I'm sure, Commissioner, you were aware of my pet peeve on the traffic around this. Different schools, especially 5 days a week I go to Clifton Hunter. almost same amount, all of us passing Town Primary, which does not have quite as much traffic, and then Savannah Primary, where there's a huge bottleneck. Literally every day I cross there, people are speeding. Can there be some consideration, whether it's a security camera or a radar? Because, sir, if you can put that at Savannah, you could literally pay for your police budget. The people that in that area that violates that constantly, even if it's only for a half an hour, 45 minutes. I mean, those gigantic trucks pass through there with no idea of what to do. I was very pleased in the meeting that my colleague and I in Newlands had at Savannah the other night, which you were attended the first one with us, and she indicated that this was something they were looking at. But I am much afraid that there's going to be a tragedy happen there if we don't do something about it. And just to indicate to you, about a month and a half ago at Clifton Hatter, making my turn to go back west, and lo and behold, there is one of your police cars flying through that 15 mile with the lights flashing, and that disappointed me a lot. So I just want to bring these things to your attention. There's a couple other ones up until last night, and I spoke to the Minister of Works on this one, and I would ask that you consider working with him on this. Coming from Georgetown going east by the Hurley's roundabout. There's one lane of traffic coming out of South Sound, 2 lanes back almost into Georgetown, trying to get through there. They're being held up every evening between 4 and 6. Last, it was 6:30, 7 o'clock, we went up through there. And that, they go through South Sound, come up there and blocks the 2 lanes that you would think would be flowing. Lets them join further down the line instead of blocking that, because as I got out of there, the traffic just was flowing smoothly. So I've spoke of that in my debate yesterday to my good friend, the Minister of Works. And I beg, I've been doing this from over 25 years now, or almost 25 years, that something be looked at this. If it doesn't work, then you can change it. But please give it consideration. I'd be most grateful. But most importantly, those school zones, the enforcement. It took us, must have been 20 years just to change the regulations and put the flashing lights up there between 2:30 and 3:30, and then I think it's from 7:30 till 8:30 in the mornings. I beg this Parliament and you, sir, and the powers that be, my good friend, the Minister of Education, I know wherever she can help, we can. But let's work at this, I please. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah, I hear you, and we'll give this attention.
Other questions?
Yeah. Just for clarity, is the training budget for police also included in this amount, or the 37 million, or is that a separate vote?
Premier?
Yes, we have some training in that. There is a range of training required for police, as you'll understand, to keep them current, and there are a range of services planned for delivery through 2018 and 2019.
Okay, the reason why I asked this, and first of all, Mr. Commissioner, I want to thank you for meeting with 2 of my constituents yesterday. As you would have been aware, the initial response for an issue that they had in Town wasn't dealt with in the best of light, and they did highlight to myself and leader of the opposition that once they met with you, there was a speedy action and everything else, and they're pleased with the progress that is taken. But after listening to their complaint yesterday, I couldn't help but wonder in terms of the level of training that some of the officers were going through to avoid an issue like that being escalated to you. Luckily enough, we were fortunate that they were the type of citizens that were a little bit more persistent. Others would have just taken it and kind of gone away with it. So, but from that standpoint, I think it's important that at least the officers on the front line, especially in taking statements or following up on simple complaints like that, especially where, a knife and all that was involved, that they would have been a little bit more proactive. So I want to thank you, but just wanted to make sure that proper funds are set aside to ensure that officers have the proper training.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions?
I just want to more of a question, but a request from the Chief of Police. The 5 members of the opposition would welcome an opportunity to meet with you to go into more details on this, because we just happen to, all of us just happen to represent the eastern districts, which have been under-resourced and under-policed for a long, long time. So we would welcome the opportunity to meet private with you rather than raising a lot of this stuff public here and prolonging the debate.
And I'd be very pleased to meet you, sir.
Okay. Member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now that the Leader of the Opposition has got the Commissioner's attention, some of the questions I will have to ask here I can ask in private. But this one I really need to ask. And I should first of all say that there are a number of people who have said that the things seems to have settled down since you've been here. I don't know if it's your presence or your management style or the management you put in the police force, but things seems to have settled down a little bit. And thanks for that. But in recent years, prior to your arrival, the behavior of drivers in this country has become deplorable. Making 4 lanes out of 1 lane and the likes, and driving without lights and no tail lights, no what have you. Public buses stopping right in the middle of the carriage lane and causing some problems. Who is responsible, one, for drivers under normal circumstances would be your people, their deviant behavior, but with the public buses, that one in particular, who is responsible to monitor these? Is it and also the roadworthiness? As far as I know, that the director of roads of licensing can his inspectors can do it, but I don't know what's happening if the police is not taking responsibility for it.
Maybe to answer that, we're working towards multi-agency checkpoints. We've had some of those discussions already during business hours, high visibility, collision-prone zones, to have a look and see what we can do with these trucks that are defective. You'll be aware that we have enhanced our roads and traffic policing department, and we will have a Christmas campaign, and we will strengthen that unit next year with the allocation of additional resources, and hope to have enhanced enforcement of Road Traffic Act legislation across the islands.
Mr. Chairman, one last thing. I would ask the Commissioner, because of my former life, I know about this. I used to be a truck driver as well. Ask your police officers to pay particular attention to those trucks, how they're loaded, the condition of the box on those trucks, the condition of the steering columns and stuff. I have some fears.
Thank you, sir. I hear you.
Just a bit of levity, sir. Can I put up some Christmas tree lights on the north side every Sunday evening?
Member for Savannah.
One quick more complaint. Someone just reminded me, and I've said it to a number of people, at the Bodentown Primary School, sir, and this would go to you and probably once again my friend from the Ministry of Works. On the west side and coming in from Georgetown way, the 15 mile per hour to go up. But as you make the turn to go into Bodentown Primary School on Anton Borden Drive, right by the road is a 30 mile per hour zone. I think someone needs to think and slip that a little bit past the school. I've said it to a number of people, but no one seems to be listening.
Yes. Okay.
Maybe when I get more hair, they'll listen, sir.
And on the other side, coming from Bodentown, the signs are in 4 different locations. Coming west, it's one place. Going east, it's another place, both for the pedestrian and for the zone. Somebody needs to coordinate that they are put in a proper place.
Yes. Member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, just a question, Commissioner. Commissioner, do you support cameras with license plate recognition and ticketable offenses on that basis?
I think effectively you're speaking of speed cameras
Yes,
for
yes.
violations. I mean, I've seen them in operation, they're quite effective. It does require a huge back-end system. If all is in place, it works quite effectively.
Okay, thank you.
I would, Mr. Chairman, through you, I was going to ask whether or not the new license plates that we're implementing, I know this doesn't fall on you, Commissioner, but if there's been any discussions as whether or not that sort of technology can be used with these new plates. I think there was some mention that it could be, but I think it would take a lot of stress and workload off of your officers to be able to do that.
Unfortunately, I don't have the full answer for that, but it's quite a progressive move if it does happen.
All those in favor of HCA 14, Protection and Investigative Services, $37,614,198 in 2018, and $38,625,869 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill. Please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. NGS 38, Services for Irregular Migrants, $2,270,000 in 2018 and $2,270,000 in 2019. Any questions?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I note that the 2016-17 was 3.6 million, and they anticipate with the same numbers, 330 to 350, it's down to 2,270,000. Okay, my colleague is reminding me that it's 18 months. Do we still anticipate the numbers, because things seem to have slowed down a bit over recent times?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I willingly acknowledge that this is something of a guessing game, because there are political forces at play that over which we have no control. And you find that there are times when there are spikes based on the political rhetoric or activity, particularly in the United States, and sometimes in Cuba. And sometimes, as at present, things quiet down. So we make a best guess about it, and if we fall short, then we have to get supplementary funding.
Member for Borden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, sir. The services provided at this center, is it by police or is it by security services firms?
At the moment, it's being run by the prison.
Okay, perfect.
Member for West East End.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, how can the Premier tell us if the repatriation, if that is working in accordance with the timelines that in particular Cuba gave us 5 years ago? 6 years ago, maybe?
Mr. Chairman, I'll ask the Chief Officer to answer that. I think we can give you quite a detailed response to that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman, the Cuban government is living up to their portion of the MOU. So in instances where there are no legal impediments to repatriation, that is carried out quite expeditiously. We're talking within days, 3 to 5 days, for a notification and acceptance of repatriation. The bigger concern, Mr. Chairman, and this is a measure of what's going on sort of regionally, geopolitically, is that the migrants are exercising in more numbers all the legal options available to them, and that is dragging out the process for repatriation. So instead of talking, 2 or 3 weeks, we have some folks who have been waiting months as they go through immigration appeals, judicial appeals, and those sorts of things. asylum appeals.
Are there any other questions?
Just a quick one. I know we're
Member for
move on,
Newlands.
something the chief officer just said. He's talking about they're exercising their legal rights. Really, how are they being represented?
Mr. Chairman, it depends on the mechanism that they're using for the Immigration Appeals Tribunal. Some use Mackenzie Friends. Those are persons who have the ability to attend and sort of counsel them as they go through. Some actually use legal befrienders. And some have private attorneys assisting them. Once they file for judicial review, then legal services can be provided to them.
So, how are the private attorneys being paid?
Mr. Chairman, for the Immigration Appeals Tribunal process, most of the attorneys are volunteering their time through the legal defenders process.
Okay, thank you.
All those in favor of NGS 38, Services for Irregular Migrants, $2,270,000 in 2018 and $2,270,000 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. Transfer payments, TP 46. Emergency relief payments, $80,000 in 2018, $80,000 in 2019. Are there any questions? TP 46. Page 8 of the appropriation bill. There are no questions. All those in favor of TP 46, emergency relief payments, $80,000 in 2018 and $80,000 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. Other executive expenses, OE 57, executive bank charges, $6,000 in 2018 and $6,000 in 2019. Are there any questions? All those in favor of OE 57, executive bank charges? My apologies.
It's okay, Mr.
I looked around. I didn't see anyone or any indication. Go ahead, member for Georgetown West Central.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I was just hoping for an explanation of exactly the bank charges and how it works. This simple one.
Premier.
Someone else said we can answer that.
I'm chairing. Go ahead, Mr. Hull.
Mr. Chairman, I've been advised by the CFO that those charges include wire transfer fees, bank draft fees, and some losses on foreign exchange conversion.
Okay. Member for Georgetown Central.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the answer. Maybe it's because of my newness, but I was just looking at the figures on here, and it has 6,000, but in the planning estimates, it has 40,000. Is that a mistake, or am I misunderstanding this?
I think the correct answer is, if I may, the 6,000 relates just to this ministry. the 40,000 relates to everyone else.
Understood, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Just to be clear, are there any other questions? All those in favor of OE 57, executive bank charges, $6,000 in 2018 and $6,000 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. OE 115, regional security initiatives, $60,000 in 2018 and $60,000 in 2019. Are there any questions? All those in favor of OE 115, Regional Security Initiatives, $60,000 in 2018 and $60,000 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. EI 11, Ministry of Human Resources and Immigration, $6,456,000 in 2018 and $7,608,000 in 2019. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, can we have some kind of breakdown of that figure? What goes for computers, what it is?
Fair enough, Mr. Chairman, if I can just have a moment to assemble that information. But that's not in there. Mr. Chairman, the following breakdown, and I'll provide something in the third year because this is a planned capital acquisition program. West Bay Police Station, 2018, 1.2 million, 2019, a similar amount, and 2020, a similar amount. Police vehicles, $500,000 2018, $500,000 2019, $500,000 2020. Cyber unit, 2018, $483,000. Tactical firearms, $323,000 2018, $158,000 2019. The police headquarters, $1 million in each of 2018 and 2019, and $10 million in 2020. Coastal Defense, $500,000 2018, $2 million 2019, and $1 million in 2020. HR and Border Control IT, $1 million in 2018, $1.5 million in 2019, and $500,000 in 2020. Advanced passenger information, $300,000 in 2018, $500,000 in 2019, and $2 million in 2020. Digital content and job integration, $750,000 in each of 2018 and 2019. And office space reconfiguration, $400,000 in 2018. So I've given you all the 3 year because that's how we've. It's all that information is available on page 172 of the plan and estimates.
Any other questions? All those in favor of EI 11, Ministry. Pardon? Oh, okay. Member for East Angor, please proceed.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I gave wrong advice. The budget statements.
Oh, makes no sense.
Member for East End, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, on the police firearms, is there a move to make more police officers proficient in firearm use?
Mr. Chairman, I would invite the police commissioner back. I don't take those decisions.
Chairman, sir. There will be a small uplift in, or at least it's proposed to have a small uplift in tactical firearms officers in 2018 and 2019 based on the additional resources that RCIPS will be allocated.
Mr. Chairman, why I'm asking that question is there seems to be somewhat of a lengthy response time for arms unit to respond to anything in that arena. Is the commissioner satisfied that that time is the best we can get, or what is his optimal time that he would like to reach to get that throughout the island? Well, throughout the country, really.
Well, for me, sir, that's about resource deployment. We provide the armed response cover 24/7, 365, and we base one unit all the time, Georgetown, dealing with Central and South Sound. We base the other in Bodentown, dealing with the east end of the island, north side. That's proved to be reasonably efficient. We augment that on an intelligence-led basis as the need arises. And at the moment, it seems to be that we're meeting our requirements there in terms of tactical firearms deployment. We operate on the basis that we're an unarmed police service with an armed response capability.
Maybe we need to go away from that now because of what the Premier said earlier about the amount of illegal firearms in this country. But I know of a recent incident, and I can't say the time that I heard was that the right time, but I certainly don't want to say that here publicly either. But if it is what I heard, then I don't know if that's a reasonable enough time to have a response team on the east end of the island. And I must tell you, Commissioner, this has been a subject for a very long time. And we have always proposed that we have a tactical team round the clock on the eastern end of the island. But of course, I understand operations and the likes. But certainly there needs to be a shorter period of time because ambulances or policy of ambulance HSA is that they can't go in unless the police officers are there, and it's a matter of life and death.
If I could qualify just what I had said previously, so we review service requirements on a daily basis and our response times based on 9/11 printouts and information received from the community. So we're looking at that consistently. And when I mentioned the deployment of armed firearms officers throughout the island, I wasn't including our Marine officers who are armed also, who provide the border protection. And there's also capacity to increase our resources in the Joint Marine Unit as we go forward.
Okay. Any consideration, and maybe the Premier can answer this, where there's some $20 million in 2020, you said, 2019-20. Any consideration for that indoor shooting range that was planned a long time ago for Bodden Town? There on Anton Bodden Drive, and a full-fledged police station for the Eastern Districts, because it has been agreed a long time ago that we would have one in Bodden Town, which would serve all those districts. Any plans for that? Those two.
Mr. Chairman, certainly not in the current budget proposal. Everything requires resources. And so we have 2 years essentially to think carefully about the next budget cycle. And so I'm not going to say to the member from East End that we won't consider it, but everything is subject to available resources, and government always has to prioritize what it is that it's going to proceed with. We do need a new central police station above all else, really, in terms of police facilities. And that is the principal focus of the government with respect to plan for the police service at this stage. So I can't make a commitment that we're going to be able to deal with that in the next budget cycle. Depends how well the government's budget performs. It depends on a whole range of things. It's too far away, really. But as I said, the principal focus now is the West Bay Police Station and the Central Police Station, but particularly the Central Police Station. The West Bay one has been substandard for as long as I can recall. As long as I can recall. So we really got to get that done too.
Mr. Chairman, I really didn't expect a definitive plan. I just wanted to know if there was any plan to, or consideration maybe in the future for that as the timelines or something. But I also had written down here about the Central Police Station. I know there was a time when we proposed selling the current police station, and which I support. There's no place for the police department. But centrally located up there by Jose, where there's plenty of room and we can get that forensic lab that we always talked about, and proper place to store items of forensic value and need for court cases and stuff.
All of those things are still under consideration, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Member for North Side?
Yeah, the question I was asking is the 1.2 million in 18 and 19 actual work on the West Bay Police Station, or is a portion of that design, or all that has been done and this money is now for actual improvements to the facility?
Mr. Chairman, the current proposal is to build a new station for West Bay on property that is not adjacent, it's very close to it, so we don't have to close that one down while we're doing it. So that's what that money is for. I believe the property is currently owned by government.
Are there other questions? All those in favor of EI 11, Ministry of Human Resources and Immigration, the amount of $6,456,000 in 2018 and $7,608,000 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. Colleagues, that concludes the Ministry of Human Resources and Immigration.
Mr. Chairman?
The next...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
With your permission, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank the Chief Officer and the other staff members and the Acting Chief Immigration Officer, the Director of Labor and Pensions, the Acting Director of NWDA, and the Commissioner of Police for their attendance and service to the committee.
Thank you very much, sir. The next ministry we'll take a look at, or appropriations that we will look at, will be for the Minister of Community Affairs. But before we do that, I'm going to propose at this point that we take the evening break. I know dinner is here and ready. So I was going to propose that we take a break and we reconvene at 6:15. Okay. Okay. So members, we will suspend proceedings until after the dinner break.